All right, I am speaking with Mr. David Suich, and he has been studying and researching NDEs for over 14 years now. I think over 700 people interviewed. Pretty incredible. I'd say we're talking to an expert. Very happy to have you on the show, Dave. Thank you so much for being on the channel.
Well, it's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking about my favorite subject.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's just dive right in there because you have spoken to 700 people or over 700 people in your research.
So I stopped counting when I published my book. So it was 700. It's probably around 1,200 if I had to guess, but yeah, somewhere in there.
That's right, because you're the author of God Took My Clothes. We're going to talk about that. We'll get back to that later because I think that's a really good title. I'm so curious. So I want to know, we were talking earlier about inspiration and stuff. Well, what inspired you to do this research on NDEs? And if you can give us just a little bit of background, what you're all about, what happened before this.
Well, I was brought up Catholic, and then I later became a Christian. And it was just like a side thing, like these are my hobbies, this is my work, this is my religion. And back in 1999, I was working for a large corporation. I was an engineer making very good money, nice 6-figure salary. I thought life was pretty good. And I got hit with chronic tendonitis, and it eventually spread through my whole body, and I couldn't work for a while. And I was really devastated. So I had been prayed for by hundreds of people, dozens of churches, and nothing happened. Now, my mentality back then was very juvenile. I viewed God as a strict disciplinarian, and you better follow his rules, and if you do, you're in his favor, and if not, you're going to be sent to eternal punishment and burn in hell forever. So that was my idea. That was my thoughts. And so I came to a very painful conclusion. So I was out of work, I was laying at home in bed, and I thought, it's one of two things is going on here. Either there is no God, it's all a lie because people can't face being extinguished when they die, or more likely, God's real, but I'm not a good Christian. I'm not, I'm a sinner. I'm out of favor. He doesn't, I'm the son that he's embarrassed about. He wants nothing to do with me. So that was my mentality. And that was a very painful conclusion to come to. And so I was in the midst of the worst part of the tendonitis in my body. And I was sitting down. I just wanted to get my mind off things. And I was on YouTube, and YouTube was fairly new at that time, back in 2007, I think it was. And I wasn't even searching for near-death experience stuff. And I clicked on this one video, and it was about an atheist who died. He didn't believe in the afterlife, and he kind of had a hellish experience. He cried out to heaven for help and was rescued. And when he was being brought towards heaven, he saw this place of beauty and perfection. And he thought, they've made a mistake. I'm bad. I'm garbage, filth, and they don't want me up there. And they stopped. And he was with Jesus, who is not quite like the Jesus of the Bible. He's apparently a really funny guy from what I've heard in near-death experience. He's very lighthearted and funny and wise. And he said to him, we don't make mistakes here. You belong here with us. And when I heard those words, I knew that I had never been abandoned, and I had never been in a state of not being loved unconditionally by our Creator. And I wasn't sure what to make of this testimony because the guy seemed pretty authentic. And he actually, okay, so when you arrive in the afterlife, thoughts are things. So some people arrive and they're a ball of energy, and others, they have this residual memory of their body. And so they manifest a body, and some even manifest the same clothes they had on when they died. And that's what happened with him. And when he got to the hellish part of his experience, there was some altercations with some bad entities, and he was naked in hell. And so when they brought him to heaven, he was naked the whole time. And I didn't hear just one testimony like that. There was a couple like that. So that's where the name of the book came from, God Took My Clothes. And he was real embarrassed about it at first. And they said, well, are you embarrassed when there's a dog walking down the street that's naked? Said, no, that's just what a dog looks like. I said, well, that's just what a human looks like. So just calm down. And so he calmed down about it. But I started researching more and more. And I realized pretty early on, these people weren't lying. So I was in sales, and I went through training on how to spot a lie, how to spot when somebody was BSing you. And none of these people displayed any of the signs of lying or making up a story. They all seem very genuine. I mean, you can listen to me speak, attentively enough, but when you look in the eyes of someone who's talking about an experience that can't be described in earthly terms, beauty beyond description, and some of them cry, even sometimes a battle-hardened soldier, who died in the war in Iraq, and they start talking about the beauty of heaven, and it brings tears to their eyes, and they say things like, it changed my life, that there's no words to describe that white light. It's love beyond description. I started to really believe these testimonies, and it became real clear that what I had been taught in religion was not entirely accurate. And so once I started learning a higher truth and a beauty of who we are, and a beauty of how we're viewed by God, he's not the strict disciplinarian. He's the loving, gentle father that's going to help you through any situation. And there's nothing you could do to make him dislike you. When I learned that, I thought people need to know about this. They need to know there's not the judgmental God. They need to know that they're not going to die, that there's this beautiful place that we go to, and that we come back and do it again, and that we're here for a reason. And so that's why I wrote my book. There were plenty of books out there describing individual testimonies, and there were plenty of books that are far beyond in terms of the level of knowledge, spiritual knowledge that I go through in my book, but they're very esoteric and difficult to understand. So I wrote the book as sort of a layman's spirituality 101 introduction to, the real world and the things that near-death experiencers describe. So I kind of tried to put what's going on here on Earth together with what they come back with in these stories, all into one sort of introductory lesson to spirituality.
And before all this, was there a time where you didn't believe in near-death experiences, that you heard of it and didn't believe in them?
Oh yeah. When I was a Christian, I heard about these things, and I was told by my pastor or somebody, well, that's a deception from the devil. If it's a deception from the devil, it's a pretty lousy one, because they come back completely changed, loving, altruistic. It's not a very good plan if that's the devil.
What are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I was just wondering if there's any one NDE out of all the ones that you've done that really resonated with you, and that sort of opened your mind to a whole different perspective of the afterlife.
Yeah, there's a couple. Howard Storms probably was the most impactful for me, because he was kind of before his NDE, he was kind of a mean tyrant. He was very ruthless, and that's the way I was. I was very vengeful, very ruthless, and Howard Storm was kind of a tyrant like that. He was kind of a bad guy, one of these guys that's, always yelling, causing chaos and that kind of thing. And he came back completely changed. And I thought, if they love that guy,
Yeah.
Well, they love me. And he said so many things. And the other one probably was Kathy Jordan. She wrote a book called The Birth Called Death. And she gave some amazing descriptions of heaven, and just one realm. There are countless realms in heaven created by the collective group of souls in those realms. So that, there's not really a heaven and a hell. We call the ones that are where a soul decides to disconnect from God, we call those the hellish realms, and then the other ones we refer to as heaven. But there's just realms, and she describes sort of what I call the first level of heaven. There's no levels. How many levels of love do you have for your children? that's very linear thinking, but I call it the first level. It's kind of laid out like Earth, but very beautiful. And these descriptions were just amazing to me. And especially with Howard Storm's testimony, probably the most impactful thing I ever heard in that testimony was when they took him through this life review, where they kind of show you what you did, good and bad, and how it affected other people. And they basically said, the whole reason of your life here was to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself, and you failed. And we were put on this earth really to learn about love, and to know it was all about love, and that no matter what I do, I'm still going to get to go home afterwards to heaven. And I was loved that much. That was very impactful to me. It really brought me to tears when I first heard those words,
Mm-hmm.
And it changed my life forever. It changed the way I deal with my family. I always butted heads with my dad. I didn't get along with my sister, my mom. I despised. I loved her, but I despised her at the same time. And all those relationships healed. And it changed my view of politics and my view of what I focus on here on earth. It's not all about making money and winning the rat race. That's just a means to survive. And we're here to show love and make a contribution to humanity. And so my whole attitude about everything, even about nature, changed. Before I thought nature is a resource. So yes, we need to take care of the earth, but we need to do that to continue the resources, so that if I want to cut down trees and plant more, I still have more trees to build with. And now I see myself as part of nature. So yeah, it changed everything. Those two testimonies were a real big impacts on my life.
And what do you think of those that come back and say, with regards to what heaven looks like and how it's structured, etc.? I've heard it often said that it's whatever one projects. Like you project.
Yes. So near-death experiencers have said that they were taught in heaven that thoughts are things. So you manifest by your thoughts. And that's really what we're doing here, but it's a long, drawn out, difficult process here. There, it's instantaneous. You think about wanting to have an apple, and you imagine in your mind white light in your hand forming itself into an apple, and it does. So you can create environments there. But often for a near-death experiencer, heaven will create an environment where the individual feels most comfortable. So I've heard people who want to dismiss these experiences say, well, they were all different. And that proves that they were imagining it. No, heaven creates the environment where you're most comfortable. So for maybe a more advanced soul, you go straight to the light. And maybe for one who's not used to that, they'll take you to the first level of heaven that's kind of like laid out like earth, with roads and streets and buildings and flowers and gardens and trees and waterfalls and lakes. So they create the environment to make you feel comfortable. If you like nature, they're going to bring you into a garden. If you were just attached to your grandmother before she died, and she was the most important person and transformative figure in your life, grandma's going to be there to meet you because that's what you're comfortable with. So they want us to feel comfortable. There was even one testimony where the guy had a certain religion where they were kind of focused on Moses, and he kind of had some Christian values as well. And, for him, it was this tug between which one's real. So he gets to heaven and they played this game with him. So Moses and Jesus were there and they were arguing, he's mine. No, he's mine. And then they came together and he realized that they're on the same team. We're all part of this unified consciousness we call God. So yeah, they'll make the environment whatever the near-death experiencer needs most to get the most out of the experience.
I've heard a lot of the unconditional love and the void in the same sentence from many people that I've spoken to. And I've spoke to one gentleman who had the very similar void type experience as Dr. Eben Alexander, which was the dirt. He found himself in basically, I say dirt, but he referred to it as very, very comforting, very soothing, very, it put him in a really nice, beautiful frame of mind, I guess, whatever you want to call it, before he went anywhere. He spent quite a bit of time in that little area. Have you ever heard of that before?
I have not heard of that, but I've heard a great variety of very different experiences. Mm-hmm. So that would just, I guess, be another one. Yeah.
On the topic of hell, so what are your thoughts of that? Like, does hell exist, or was it made up in order to instill fear in people? Or do you think it's something that is, again, just projected by, the frame of mind the person's in, or the fear from the void that maybe provoked those other things? What do you think? Is it a real place? Because I mean, I'll tell you what I think afterwards. I'm curious about what you think.
Okay, I would say yes on all counts of everything you just said. So a person can create their own hellish NDE by their thoughts. My understanding of hell is, I was taught in Catholic school that hell is the place where you go for punishment because you didn't obey God. Well, punishment is a human concept. All right. So that heaven they don't have that concept of punishment. You did something bad, so you have to pay. I mean, this is a very difficult planet to incarnate on. All right. So the universe is full of life, and there are countless other dimensions, all containing their own universes that are also full of life. Now, this galaxy has somewhere between 100 billion to 400 billion stars. And our galaxy is a pinpoint of light in the great universe. Okay. So if you want to talk about how big our galaxy is, the pinpoint of light, if you were to travel speed of light, that's 7 times around the Earth in a second, you would have to travel day and night for an entire lifetime and then repeat it for 1,200 lifetimes just across the pinpoint of light that we call the Milky Way galaxy. Earth is the most difficult planet to incarnate on in this entire galaxy. It's one of the most difficult in the entire universe. So, of course, we're going to have a hard time down here. And when people get to the afterlife, they can bring some of that negativity with them. Some souls decide to disconnect completely from God, which is what I would call the hellish realm. So when you disconnect completely from source and from God, you can experience what that disconnection is like. And it's nothing but fear and everything that fear manifests as. So it's not a punishment. And I strongly suspect it is not permanent. So it is sort of a place designed that if you decide to go there, to be as scary as possible. So you choose love and choose connection. And when a soul is ready, you get kids like this. They're mad at you. You're not my mommy. You're not my daddy. Well, it's only going to be so much time before they stop that nonsense and they come back. And it's the same with the soul. Soul can become so lost down here and so infused with fear that they can bring that with them to the other side, and it can manifest as a hellish experience. But it's not a punishment. It's a choice. It's not permanent. I would say most souls here have probably already experienced it. And I've heard testimonies of people who were in these hellish experiences and either called out every single testimony I heard where they were in a hellish experience and they called out to heaven for help, every single one, they were rescued. Mm-hmm. So it's a temporary state of consciousness. And even that has its experience in growth. All right. So the best food I ever tasted was not my favorite dessert or favorite dish. It was when I went 2 days without eating. Mm-hmm. And I finally got home and I had a piece of wheat toast with some butter on it. And I didn't like wheat toast at that time. And it was the best meal in the world. Okay. So when you separate completely from love, from God, from source, from community, from peace, from safety, from all those things, that's our nature. And you have the illusion of separateness. When you go back to that connection, it's going to be stronger. So even the experience of hell is something that helps grow the consciousness of the individual, helps propel them towards the light.
It's extraordinary how similar some of the vivid descriptions of this hell place that they were in. I mean, they're like really similar, and you could see in their eyes, obviously they believe that they were there. And I have no doubt that they really believe that they were there, obviously. But what freaks me out is how similar some of the descriptions, and very, very specific, like vivid, descriptive,
I've probably heard, I don't know, I'm guessing to be around 50 or 100, something like that. And yeah, I don't like them. they're scary beyond belief. I mean, as people who talked about it say, well, imagine being the character in the worst horror movie you've ever seen and multiply that by 100 or 1,000. And there's a feeling there that there's no way out, that this is permanent. So yeah, it can be really terrifying for the person there. It can be just beyond bad. Some people who had hellish NDEs, it took them a year to feel normal again, to not wake up in a cold sweat, having nightmares about it. It's that bad.
PTSD, yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, the consciousness of a human being is very strong, and just as we are capable of manifesting the most beautiful love and compassion-based environments, we are capable of generating fear. We absolutely are, and we're very good at it.
You had mentioned, and I'm totally in agreement with you, how, the earth is a school of the soul, or one of the schools for the soul.
You can do anything at any pace you want. So you don't have to incarnate here to learn everything you want, but it's a very fast way to do it. So if I have to go on foot from here where I am to 5 miles away, I can take a leisurely walk and I'm not going to suffer, and it's going to be nice. and I'll get there, or I can run, I can sprint, and I'm going to suffer a lot, but I'm going to get there fast. Well, Earth is like you're sprinting as fast as you can.
My question is, because you had mentioned like that it was one of the most difficult. So do you know of another place where we incarnate that's even more difficult than Earth?
No,
No? Okay.
no, I've never heard about the planets in the universe that are more difficult than this place. I hope I don't choose to incarnate there, because when when I remember when I first heard about what we chose to come down here, I'm like, what the heck was I thinking?
Yeah.
I could have stayed in this beautiful place. Well, the desire to grow and evolve
Yeah.
is big, and Earth and really all physical incarnations, what we're doing by that, we're like the engine of growth of the fractal of God. I don't know how else to describe it, but by doing what we do, we create higher levels of consciousness and a fractal of God that becomes more, I don't want to say complex, becomes more elaborate. So this is how God grows and evolves through these physical incarnations. They're a big part of how he does that. So like, think about, all right, so you know yourself pretty well, right? Well, how could you really know yourself even better? Well, you'd have to become every person around you, your children, your wife, your coworkers, your friends, your family, and you'd have to see their perspective of you to really know yourself better. So when a soul incarnates, a little piece of God separates, forgets that it's God, comes into a body, and then sees all the other little pieces of God and how they are and interacts. And it's a way of sort of God experiencing, getting to know himself as he grows and changes.
You
So
were the
that's
first person to say that. I've been saying this for years now. And
really,
and yeah, and often people look at me like I'm crazy.
well, look
I
at the,
always thought that all of this, everything that we are, including this wooden table in front of me, are all little pieces of God. And it's just a little piece of that one big master piece of consciousness up in the sky, if you will. And so I just, figured we're all little fragments. And of course, we forget with the veil, because otherwise, defeats the purpose. How could God have fun if he knows everything about what's going on, right? I just
yeah,
always
that's
felt
right.
like we're just little pieces of the collective consciousness, you know?
Yep.
And,
So we don't really learn here in a traditional sense. Okay. It's not, you know, everything in heaven. You've got God consciousness. There are no questions because you know all the answers.
Mhm.
But
To experience it.
right, the learning down here, exactly. I like that you use that word. It's an experiential learning,
Mm.
right? So if you had an engineer who had a super brain and he studied Disneyland and he knew every nut and bolt and worker and schedule and how every ride worked and schedules. He knew everything about Disneyland there is to know, but he'd never been there. He knows less about Disneyland than a 10-year-old child who experiences it. And let's take that one step further. I used to live 5 miles from Disneyland over there in Anaheim, California. So every time a friend or relative came to town, they wanted to go to Disneyland, and my company would rent the entire park out and one evening a year, and we'd go. And I was tired of it. I'd been there a gazillion times. It's like, okay, I've been on this ride. It's kind of interesting, kind of fun, but not really. Well, what if I could forget that I know all about Disneyland? What if I could put myself into the consciousness of a 10-year-old child who had never known Disneyland and I went? I would have a much different experience. And then when the day's over with, I'd remember all my other experiences at Disneyland, but this one was special because I experienced it the way a child would, with
Mhm.
wonder. That's kind of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
We're experiencing it, sort of a wonder of innocence and ignorance, and we learn through that experience and we grow.
I've heard a lot of testimonies, as I'm sure you have as well, from NDEers, that once they die, once they leave their bodies, there's like zero attachment. They recognize that it's themselves,
Mhm.
and mostly it's just kind of left at that. Oh, there I am, and who cares, right? Um, and of course, I've heard other accounts as well where mothers are still very oh, I need to go back, my kids, they need me, etc., etc. But a lot of accounts are just like, push it to the side and let me move on with this beautiful experience, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Do we eventually just shed all that off and blend back into the universe or blend back into God, or is it different for everybody, or what's your take on that?
Sure, we've been blend back sometimes. So sometimes you're together with your family and sometimes you want to be alone, right?
Yep.
And both are valuable and you don't want all of one or the other. So sometimes you'll unify with the God consciousness and you lose who you are completely. You're no longer you. But then anytime you want, you can come out and be you again and be the little facet of God that's seeing the rest of God from that individual perspective, right? So you've had all these lifetimes incarnating, and so you've gained all these experiences that make you an individual. And souls describe it. They describe this process of merging with God and separating. So people see this as like, oh, I'm losing my identity. No, it's a wonderful thing. So you got a computer with a hard drive, right? And you got documents and sound files and movies on there. Well, what about when the computer's turned off? You got a full-length movie. It's just a bunch of ones and zeros mixed in on the hard drive. That's all it is. It's not separate. It's not something individual, unique. But anytime you want, you can turn that computer on and open that file and you watch the movie. And now it's this separate, different thing, even though at the same time, it's really only ones and zeros on the hard drive. So there really is never any separateness. It's just the illusion of separateness of the individual. So it's God going to one little part of the giant fractal of God and deciding to experience himself from that unique individual perspective. So that's what we are. So when you're looking at another human being, really you're looking at another part of yourself. You're looking at another version perspective of yourself, which is why it's so important, near-death experiences say over and over again that you can't harm another human being without harming yourself. You can't help another human being without helping yourself, because that's you. Okay. So things like war to a near-death experiencer are as ignorant. That's as ignorant as ignorant can be, because war is like, now what's a good example? I'm outside working in the yard, and I accidentally poke myself in the eye with my right hand. And my left hand says, "You son of a gun, how dare you? I'll make you pay for that." My left hand picks up a hammer and smashes the heck out of my right hand. Well, that's what war is, right? So when we realize the connectedness, if a human beings tomorrow, if every human being had 3 seconds in front of the light and saw the unity consciousness and the love and the compassion, that is our nature. They would come back and it would be difficult to impossible to think a negative thought about another human being. And then the other thing that would happen is all the forgotten humans, those who are too mentally ill or sick or old or unwilling to take care of themselves, that have been forgotten and abandoned by society. I mean, Los Angeles has a skid row of 55,000 people, and it looks like a post-apocalyptic scene or a third world country. Those people would be swarmed the next day if everyone got a feeling for unity consciousness, because with very little effort and money, those people could be brought back into a good life. And when you bring hope or joy to just one soul, millions receive the vibration because of this common connectedness. So that's low-hanging fruit. So because of a lack of our understanding of this common consciousness and our connectedness, we're more connected than separate. Any separation is only an illusion, a temporary perspective. Because human beings don't get that, we have a lot of problems on the planet. Yeah. Okay, so we have people that do things to benefit themselves at the expense and harm of many others. And that wouldn't happen if we really understood the connectedness. I was out riding my bike one day in LA on a bike path, and I saw this poster, and it said, it summed it up perfectly. It said, "None of us are well until all of us are well." And really, that was a beautiful universal truth. I don't know who put it up there, but somebody got it. Somebody understood the big picture.
Let's talk about the life review. What have you learned about the life review over the course of your studies?
Okay, so as you mentioned earlier, and we talked about, not every near-death experiences are the same. They're all different. And I think IANS has the stats on this, the International Association of Near-Death Experience Studies. They got a big website, IANDS. And they've got the stats, but I think about a fourth of the people have a life review. So the life review can differ as well. Again, it's tailored to the individual. Some people go through their entire life, every single thing they ever saw, thought, said, felt, and did, and they re-experience it. Now, it's not like living another 80 years over again. There's no time on the other side of the veil. And so it's this instantaneous thing. Some people describe it as a panoramic life review. Now, others just go through highlights. So it's whatever the soul needs for their life review, because the people up there, that the souls up there in heaven know we're coming back. They know what we need. So they have these life reviews. Now, in these life reviews, it's a learning experience. So they show you how you affected the people around you, the people you interacted with. Now, in this physical incarnation that we're in, I only experience life from the perspective of one person, me. Okay. I see through my eyes, I hear through my ears. I don't experience life as you, John, or anybody else. I can't put myself in your position. I can't think, I can't learn everything about your history and why you think and feel the things you do. Well, in this near-death experience life review, you become every person you've ever interacted with. So there was a guy, for instance, who was kind of a bully in life, and he was a big, strong guy. And I'll give you an example. He was out driving his truck. A pedestrian crossed in front of him illegally. He got mad. He gets out. He has an altercation with the guy, and they end up fighting, fist fight. So there he is in his life review, punching the guy, beating the heck out of the guy. And at the same time, he experienced it from that guy's perspective, as if he was that person. He felt his nose break. He felt his teeth breaking. He remembers the fear. He experienced the fear that guy had of being in public, and the humiliation of being beaten up in a fight and all that. So, and that it goes the other way too, with something good. One woman, she said this was in the time before cell phones, and it was back east, and it was snowing, and she was on her way to work, and there was a motorist who was stranded, another woman who was stranded and needed a jump start. She's holding up the jumper cables, and nobody was stopping. And she was in a hurry to get to work. So she thought, I'm just going to help this lady and go. So she helped the lady, gave her a jump start, and took off without even being thanked. And she thought nothing of it. Well, in her life review, she experienced it from the perspective of that woman who had been stranded for a couple of hours. She was getting cold. And there was, I remember from when I was a kid back in Ohio, there was incidents of people who got stuck in the snow, and if somebody didn't help them, they froze to death. There was news stories about that. Yeah. So she's worried about, what's going to happen? Is somebody going to rescue me? And all of a sudden this angel comes, and she doesn't even wait to be thanked. She takes off. So she experienced the joy from that person who was rescued. I mean, you give you're eating a sandwich, and you give the rest to some homeless guy, thinking nothing of it. And, then you get to your life review, and you're him, and you find out that, hasn't eaten in 2 days, and this sandwich is like a gourmet meal. There's a ripple effect to what we do. So whether it's a good act or a bad act, that ripples out. And people even saw things like in Howard Storm's, for instance, testimony. In his life review, he came home one day, and his dad started getting on him about stuff, and they got into an argument. He really upset his dad. And when he had his life review, he saw what a bad day his dad had at work and why he was in a bad mood. And so this life review is to teach us that our thoughts and words and actions have a great deal of influence on others. I mean, just one tiny act of love, it just spreads like a wildfire. Love is such a powerful emotion and powerful energy. It's way more powerful than fear. Our words have power. Our actions have power, and we're meant to make a good influence here. Mm-hmm. And we need to use that power for the best thing possible. And I think the movie The Letter Writer talked about that. This guy was, he used his words to hurt other people, and he had a friend that he had an argument with, and the friend died before he could apologize. And he decided for the rest of his life to use words to uplift and encourage others. So the life review is there to show us that, we're here to show love to our fellow human beings, and compassion, and be kind and forgive. And I've heard from some near-death experiencers that nothing is more meaningful to those in heaven than when we manage to be kind and compassionate and loving to people who absolutely don't deserve it, who our ego tells us they don't deserve it. There was a woman who forgave her son's killer, and actually visited him in jail. And she took that man into her house afterwards to help him get started. I mean, just that kind of thing. They love that up there.
So where do you think we're at, like in terms of, NDEs, science? How seriously are they being taken? Where are we with this right now?
Oh, well, I've heard NDE accounts as early as I think as the 1930s. I think the oldest one was 1940s, maybe 30s. I don't recall exactly. If you talked about an NDE back then, you'd be in danger of being put into a psychiatric ward.
Yeah.
Okay, even as late as the 50s, they might do that. There were a couple of cases where that happened. And then you were looked at as crazy. If you were in a church and you talked about a near-death experience, they would, tell you to shut up about it. And then Raymond Moody's book, the very first one, Life After Life, came out in 1975, and it kind of caused a stir. And I think really the change has been the internet. Even when I started in 2007, it was very difficult for me to find near-death experience testimonies and track people down. Well, now it's super easy. There are probably tens of thousands of videos just on YouTube. So it's really starting to become mainstream. You even see it in movies. I mean, they made the movie Soul, and they make jokes in the movie about go towards the light. Well, that didn't have any meaning 50 years ago. So people are becoming more familiar with it. It's not mainstream yet, but it's getting there. There's too many people who are stuck in the paradigm of their religion to accept this higher truth. And there are others who don't believe it at all. So probably the best thing we can do is, we're going to be looked at as crazy still to some extent. Anytime you're pioneering a new truth that you're revealing, you're going to be looked at as crazy. And the best thing we can do, like I used to get real offended when I was early on in my research, when somebody told me, oh, it's all hogwash, or they're imagining it, or they're hallucinating, I'd get really offended. And now I just, okay, well, they're not there yet. They're not ready to accept that truth. Yeah. I even had an atheist. I was at an art and music festival, and this was when my book was first published, and he got real mad. Another guy was reading it. He got real mad. He said, that's all hogwash. I'm an atheist. You're just in a fantasy world. And I smiled, and I said, well, we believe the same thing, don't we? Just reversed. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, you believe we're human beings pretending we have a God, and I believe we're little facets of God pretending to be human. So we kind of believe the same thing, just reversed, right? Yeah. I said, I respect your view. There's no concrete evidence other than, there's no pictures, there's no video of it. I respect that view. I mean, I think we both hope that you're wrong. And he kind of laughed, and, there's no point in arguing about it. People will come around eventually. Yeah, they're stuck in the paradigm of their beliefs. I mean, and spirituality and the existence of God is held to a different standard, right? So 700 testimonies from my book. If you were to go in a court of law and have 700 people all testify to the same thing, that'd be considered overwhelming evidence. I mean, I've heard from people who were blind since birth. They describe the colors of the uniforms of the people in the hospital. Stuff that you can't fake it, but they always try and come up with something to dismiss it. I remember I watched this one special where scientists said, well, when you die, you see your cones that perceive vision, they die, and they die from the sides. And so it looks like a light, and it might look like a tunnel. Yeah. It's like, well, no, they describe going into this light and then having a conversation. It's like, that's not what they're describing. Yeah. They'll say, oh, the feel-good feelings are because when you die, your brain releases all the serotonin and dopamine at once. So that's your feel-good. No, that's not. So many things hallucinations don't transform people's lives. They don't give you spiritual gifts. One of the guys I interviewed, he died in a dentist chair. So he had a back injury. He had taken Vicodin for his back injury. And one of the things Vicodin does, it's a very powerful narcotic and painkiller, but it makes you forgetful. So he forgot that he took it, and he took it again. And then he went to the dentist, and they put him under, and he died. And so he comes back, and he's in the grocery store, and he's looking at this lady, and he's seeing visions of this ring, like a wedding ring, in this dark place. And there's kind of like these grating lines of light with light coming through. And he says, this looks like underneath the refrigerator. So he walks up to the lady really nervous because before that, he didn't have any psychic or special abilities. And he told her, I think there's a wedding ring under the refrigerator. Told her what he saw. And she didn't say anything to him. Takes out her cell phone, makes a call, and says, sweetie, can you check under the refrigerator? And then just her face lights up. And she says to him, my mother died recently, and we lost her wedding ring, which was very special. And I was just tortured that this had happened. She goes, I don't know who you are or how you knew that, but thank you. Well, that can't be explained as a trick of the dying brain. So, yeah. But, I think heaven wants, from everything I heard from near-death experiencers, if I'm arguing with somebody about spirituality or religion, I've kind of lost the point. Love doesn't challenge another person's belief. Sure, if they see your life and that you're happy and that you react to anger with compassion and kindness and that you're quick to forgive and you've got all these positive qualities and they ask you what your secret, well, then you tell them. But love really doesn't challenge another person's belief or religion. It just kind of accepts them where they are. I mean, when I was a Christian, I was taught that, evangelism is really important. Well, you can preach religion all day, even if it's a really good religion, and you'll have some success, but not very much. If you try and preach love and spread love, it's going to be overwhelmingly accepted. Yeah. And that's what they want us to do. So I try to do my best not to ever condemn somebody for their beliefs or their choice of religion. And really religion, people think we're going to become enlightened and religion's going to go away. No, it's not. It's going to mature. All right. So the Catholic religion, for instance, it's maturing. 500 years ago, they were selling indulgences. Pay the Catholic Church money and we'll have the clergy pray for your dead relative who might be in hell and assure they get into heaven. Well, they don't do that anymore. That's ridiculous. They've matured out of that. And even when I was a kid, I went to Catholic school. I remember the, pastor saying, you're going to go to hell. You got to obey God. And I still go to Catholic church because my wife is Catholic. And I was there, it was about a month ago. And the pastor was talking about the story of the prodigal son. And his conclusion was, you see, God loves you no matter what you do. He's not going to punish you for being bad. He's not going to judge you. That was in a Catholic church. Oh my God, they've changed.
That's new.
If a priest would have said that 50 years ago when I was a kid, he'd never be preaching in that church again.
Oh, no, forget it. Us lose power? No, I don't think so.
No, and so religions are changing and they're eventually going to see the beauty in the way the other religions honor God. So religion is just different cultures honoring God in their own way. And there's so much in common in many of the world's religions: love, compassion, brotherly love, charity for the impoverished, forgiveness, self-control, good behavior. We have all these things in common. And, of course, heaven's not invested in the dynamic structure of religion as we are. It's just a tool. Mm-hmm. And I like to say religion is Captain Cook's brew. In the late 1700s, when ships made long voyages that would last several years, they wouldn't get fresh fruits and vegetables. They got salt beef and things like that and grains, but they didn't have fresh fruits and vegetables on board. And if you go long enough without vitamin C in your body, you get scurvy and die. Yeah. So it's very common for over half the crew to die of scurvy if you're on a 2 or 3 year voyage. Well, Captain Cook, he had a special brew that he served up to his crew on a regular basis. And if you drank Captain Cook's brew, you didn't get scurvy. So in the late 1700s, he successfully circumnavigated the globe. And that had been done before, but without a single death from scurvy, that was a new one. Well, it had an odd mixture of ingredients: malt, sauerkraut, vinegar, had all this stuff in there. One of the ingredients was lemon syrup, which is loaded with vitamin C. So it was the active ingredient. The rest of the ingredients had no effect. And the active ingredient in any religion is the love of God. And barring a few radical elements of some religions where, they think it's the duty for them to kill in the name of God, barring those radical elements, I see the active ingredient of love in just about every major religion in the world. Cryon, he's an entity channeled by Lee Carroll. So Cryon is supposedly in charge of the magnetic field of the earth, which affects consciousness. And he tells an analogy about how God feels about religion. So near-death experiencers ask about it. what's the best religion? The answer is always the same. Whatever one brings you closest to God,
Yeah.
if you want to use religion. So he says, imagine you're in a bit of divorce and your spouse gains custody of the children when they're very young. And out of anger, and spite and hatred for you, that the spouse takes them far away, moves out of state and hides the children from you. You're never going to see your children again, So you look for them for many years. And after 10, 15 years, you give up in despair. And then one day you get a phone call and it's them. And they say, we've been looking for you all these years. We miss you. We want to see you. We're here in the neighborhood. Can we come over and see you? You're overjoyed. Oh my God, it's the best moment of your life. You're going to see your kids after all these years. So you go outside and wait, and there's a car coming down the road, and it's them. And you're just full of excitement. Now, let me ask you this. Do you care what kind of car it is? Do you care if it's a broken down old car with a lot of problems or a brand new car in perfect condition? You don't care. You're happy your kids are coming to see you, as your family. God doesn't care if you're in a religion with a lot of misguided concepts and messed up doctrines. He's just happy his kids are coming to see him and want to honor him, right? So when you're a parent, right, you're a father, your children express love in different ways. One might give you a drawing that says, I love you, Daddy, or another one comes up and gives you a hug, or another wants to help out with the chores. And that's a beautiful thing to a parent, to see their children expressing love in different ways. It'd be okay if they all express it in the same way, but there's kind of a beauty that they all express their love in different ways. And so all the world's religions, they're in their ceremonies and their traditions, the things they do, it's not necessary, most of their doctrines, but it's a beautiful expression of love to God. And I really do believe he sees that as a beautiful expression of love from his children, just the very different ways that all the religions honor him.
Yeah, that's
beautiful.
Wonderfully put. I really like that. I enjoyed that. Yeah. What are your thoughts on not just guardian angels, but them incarnating on Earth as physical beings? Do you think that's possible?
So my understanding is there are some guardian angels who don't incarnate here. They never incarnate into human form. It's not part of their position and their job and their area of expertise. So they don't incarnate. There are others that you would call guardian angels because they're here helping us, that are human beings who live physical existences, and now they're down here. I even remember one near-death experience. So I was very upset because he wouldn't tell me the senator's name, but apparently his father was a senator. So he died. And when he got to heaven, his grandfather was showing him around heaven. And he says, well, what do you guys do up here? And his grandfather says, well, one of the things that we do is we enjoy helping you guys down there on Earth. So when an angel or a human being, in heaven as a spirit form comes down to help us as an angel, and they speak to us, we hear it as a thought in our heads, or maybe a feeling. Okay. So he says, I'll show you. I got to remind your dad of a meeting he forgot about. So they're both in spirit form. They go down to this meeting of these political characters, and his dad's sitting there in the meeting. And the grandfather leans over to his son during this meeting and says, son, you have that charity event you have to get to. And this guy witnesses his father, talking in the middle of this meeting saying, oh, shoot, I forgot. I've got to get to this charity event. We're going to have to, continue this later. So they help us in covert ways. A lot of times when we get an idea or some sort of synchronicity that helps us out, that's them talking to us, and there's even angels who are specialists with certain emotions. So this one guy who had an NDE, he was in hospice, and he had a falling out with his brother and hadn't spoken to her 20 years. And he was like sort of in between worlds. He died a couple times and was, came back, they revived him. And when he was there in heaven, he said, well, I'm really concerned about my brother. I want to reconcile things with him before I die. And they said, oh no, we got that taken care of. We're sending a specialist to your brother. A specialist? He said, well, yeah, this is an angel who is a specialist in forgiveness and reconciliation. And he's like, well, so is it like mind control? Said, no. They shine the emotion on the person. The person can reject the idea. They can always reject it. We have free will. We can reject anything, but they're very good at what they do. And so while he was in hospice, his brother came to him and they had a reconciliation. And it was this angel of compassion, forgiveness that put the idea in his brother's head. So they're always doing work, helping us out, especially when we're in our most difficult moments. And something really interesting, another story about how the angels help us. A couple of years back, right before COVID, my wife and I went on the road. We bought a 17-foot travel trailer. It's called a micro mini. 2 words and they both mean small. And I spent about 2 years on the road. And I was in Ohio, and just out of the blue, and again, I don't think it was out of the blue. I think somebody talked to me up here and I heard it. Somebody said, "Hey, your old friend Jerry from high school, you should go see him." And I thought, "Oh yeah, Jerry lives in this town." And I go look up my old friend Jerry. And this is right after I had published the first version of my book, I think. And he was always a cheerful guy, always smiling, always in a good mood. And was in the same place of business. And I knock on the door, come in, and he was on the couch, really distraught. His wife had left him for his best friend. He had gotten bitten by a brown recluse spider and spent 4 months in the hospital. His business was failing. He got type 1 diabetes from the spider bite, had all these health problems. And I started talking to him, and he was telling me all this stuff. And then he tells me he had a near-death experience. And my jaw almost dropped. And I said, "Jerry, you're not going to believe this." And I went out to my car, I got a copy of the book and I gave it to him, and he read it and he really liked it. And so they sent me there, and they also sent him an angel. He said when he came back from his NDE and he's going through all this divorce proceeding and all this and losing his house that he had built, he was just really depressed one day, and he was in this park and he just thought, I can't go another day. I'm not going to make it. I mean, just the pit of depression and hopelessness. And this homeless guy is sitting there, and he thinks, I'm going to give this guy some money. So he walks up to the homeless guy and he says, "This is all the money in my wallet." He gives him a few $100. And the homeless guy says, No, you keep that. I don't need money right now. You need it more than I do. I've been waiting for you. And this homeless guy starts talking to Jerry, and he knows all about Jerry's life. And they have a long 2-hour conversation. And this homeless guy just really encouraged Jerry. And he said, "I believe that was an angel down here." And they often masquerade as people to interact with us. Sometimes most of the time they're here in spirit form, but in difficult, traumatic situations, they will sometimes appear in physical form. Either as a stranger or a homeless person, or maybe even sometimes an animal, just to encourage us.
What do you make of those that they die but they don't have an experience, or maybe they do but they don't remember it?
I have a theory that they all have NDEs. In fact, I've been told by near-death experiences that we leave our bodies every night and go to heaven. I believe they don't remember them. Okay, because some people who have near-death experiences remember them right away. Others a week later, a month later, some years later. All right. And I think the reason most are not allowed to remember it is because they may not need that, or it may be a hindrance to their spiritual growth. It may take their focus off of this earthly plane. So a lot of these people come back and they're kind of in between worlds, kind of like, where you sometimes feel, you're kind of in the spirit world in here. And that can be a hindrance to the task of the individual. And then it's really, really difficult for some people to experience pure perfection, pure love, the kind of love you've wanted your whole life and chased and never really got. I mean, people near-death experiencers say things like, imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life, put them all in one moment, you don't come close. Imagine the strongest love you've ever felt, multiply it by 1,000, you don't come close. And when you experience that pure perfection, coming back here for some near-death experiencers is really traumatic, and they just long to be back there in that love and light again. So it can be too hard on people. They can just long for that life, and some people can handle it and some don't. So I think most don't remember it. And even people in a coma, they will often spend that time there in heaven and not remember, but some do.
Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. It's just there's so much to learn from that you gave us tonight, and I'm really happy that we did this. Hey, Dave, man, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
It has.
Really
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.